I want to divorce Amara, and I want it right now. The words didn't just break the silence. They detonated the room. Before the final syllable had even left David Okoye's lips, he shoved a 4-tier red velvet cake with the flat of his palm. The sound was sickening, a mixture of shattering crystal, wet sponge, and a collective gasp of 300 of Lagos's elite. The towering confection, which had taken 3 days to construct, exploded against the polished marble floor of the Grand Sapphire Hotel. Red frosting and white fondant splattered across the hem of Amara's emerald silk gown, looking disturbingly like blood. "David," Amara whispered, her hands trembling as they hovered over her chest. "The guests, everyone is watching. Let them watch." David roared, grabbing the microphone from the stand. The feedback screech pierced the air, forcing guests to cover their ears. "I invited them here to celebrate our anniversary, didn't I? Well, let's celebrate the truth instead." Amara felt the blood drain from her face. The heat of the spotlights felt like an interrogation lamp. She looked around the ballroom. Faces she recognized, wives of politicians, oil tycoons, Nollywood stars, all of them freezing, phones raised, recording her destruction in 4K resolution. "For years," David boomed, his voice echoing off the high-vaulted ceilings, "I gave this woman a mansion in Ikoyi. I gave her cars. I gave her a life most of you only dream of. And what did she give me?" He pointed a finger at her, trembling with performative rage. "Nothing. She is a barren wasteland. A dead end." Amara's knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. "David, please. Not here. Let's go home." "I don't have a home with you anymore," David sneered. He turned toward the double mahogany doors at the back of the hall. "Open them." The doors swung wide. The hush that fell over the room was absolute. Walking in was Zainab, Amara's best friend since university, the woman who had helped Amara zip up her dress 3 hours ago. Zainab wore a glittering gold dress that hugged every curve, specifically the undeniable, protruding curve of a 6-month pregnancy. She wasn't alone. Holding her hands were 2 toddlers, a boy and a girl, who looked unmistakably like David. Amara felt her heart stop. The room spun. The betrayal wasn't a knife in the back. It was a guillotine. "This," David announced, walking over to wrap his arm possessively around Zainab's waist, "is a real woman. These are my children, and the one in her belly is my son." Zainab didn't look at Amara. She looked at the cameras, offering a shy, victorious smile. "Pack your bags, Amara," David said, his voice dropping to a cruel, dismissive tone. "Security will escort you out. You have 1 hour to vacate my house." Laughter. Someone in the back actually laughed. It started a ripple. The judgment was palpable, a heavy smog choking the air. She couldn't keep a man. She was defective. She was discarded. Amara's grip on the table failed. The darkness in the corners of her vision surged forward. The marble floor rushed up to meet her face. She expected the cold, hard stone, but she never felt it. She was floating. A shadow had detached itself from the VIP balcony, a figure who had been watching proceedings with the stillness of a predator. C.O. Junho. He moved with a speed that defied his size. He was there before the first guest could gasp. He caught Amara inches from the ground, scooping her up into his arms effortlessly. His suit was Italian, charcoal gray, tailored to hide the holster beneath his left arm. His face was sharp, angular, and terrifyingly calm. "Put her down," David shouted, his ego bruised by the sudden shift in attention. He stormed off the stage, leaving Zainab behind. "Who do you think you are?" "Security. Throw this man out." Junho didn't look at the security guards rushing forward. He didn't even look at David initially. He looked down at the unconscious woman in his arms, noting the tear tracks cutting through her makeup. Slowly, Junho turned. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The security guards skidded to a halt, their instincts screaming at them to stop. They recognized the look in this man's eyes. It was the look of a man who had killed before and would do it again before his pulse even quickened. "She is no longer your wife," Junho said. His voice was soft, barely a whisper, yet the acoustic engineering of the hall carried it to every corner. "You discarded her. I'm David Okoye. David spat, stepping into Junho's personal space. I own half the auto dealerships in this city. I pay for this hotel. Correction, Junho said, his accent thick but his English precise. You rent space in this hotel. Junho shifted Amara's weight slightly, ensuring her head rested comfortably against his shoulder. David Okoye, born 1985, owner of Okoye Motors, currently leveraging 3 properties to secure a loan of 1.8 billion naira to expand into logistics. David froze. How do you know that? You took that loan from a shell company called Blue Ocean Ventures. Junho continued, his eyes dead and flat like a shark's. Blue Ocean Ventures is a subsidiary of Sapphire Holdings. Junho took 1 step forward. David took 2 steps back. I am CEO Junho, the majority shareholder of Sapphire Holdings. The silence that followed was deafening. The guests lowered their phones, sensing that recording this might be dangerous. Sapphire Holdings wasn't just a company. It was an empire with rumored ties to the 7-star syndicate in Seoul. You are currently in default on 2 interest payments. Junho lied smoothly, or perhaps he wasn't lying. It didn't matter. He was a law now. I am calling in the full amount of loan, effective immediately. You can't do that, David stammered, sweat breaking out on his forehead. The contract says... I am the contract. Junho cut him off. You have 24 hours to pay 1.8 billion naira, or I seize your dealerships, your house, and the car you drove here in. He looked past David, straight at Zainab. I hope your mistress likes public transport. Junho turned and walked away, carrying Amara like she weighed nothing. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. No one dared to stop him. No one dared to breathe. He carried her out of the ballroom, down the long glass corridor, and into his private elevator. He pressed the button for the penthouse. The doors slid shut, sealing out the noise of the destroyed party. Inside the elevator, the facade cracked. Junho leaned back against a mirrored wall, his breath hitching. A sudden, violent wave of dizziness hit him. His vision blurred, swimming with black spots. The strength that had allowed him to hold Amara so effortlessly moments ago evaporated. He slid down the wall, clutching her tightly to his chest so she wouldn't hit the floor until they were both sitting on the elevator carpet. He coughed, a wet, hacking sound that tore at his throat. He pulled a white handkerchief from his pocket and pressed it to his mouth. When he pulled away, the white silk was stained with a bright, terrifying crimson. Blood, too much of it. The elevator chimed. Amara stirred in his arms. Her eyelids fluttered open. She looked up, disoriented, her eyes focusing on his face. Who are you?" she whispered, her voice groggy. Then her eyes drifted down to the handkerchief in his hand, to the blood on his lips. Junho tried to hide it, clenching his fist, but another wave of nausea hit him. His head lolled forward, his forehead resting against hers. "I am," he rasped, fighting the darkness closing in on his own mind. "I am someone running out of time." His eyes rolled back. The billionaire savior, the man who had just destroyed her husband with a few sentences, slumped unconscious against her, his blood staining the emerald silk of her dress, mixing with the red frosting from the cake. Amara screamed for help, but the doors were already closing again. The sterile scent of rubbing alcohol and ozone filled the penthouse bedroom. It was a massive room, walls made entirely of glass overlooking the glittering skyline of Victoria Island and the Atlantic Ocean beyond. Amara sat in a velvet armchair in the corner, her ruined dress replaced by a silk robe she had found in the guest bathroom. She watched the private doctor pack his bag. Junho lay in the center of the king-size bed, and 4 drip was connected to his arm. His skin, usually a pale alabaster, looked translucent, almost gray under the dim recessed lighting. The doctor, a calm Nigerian man named Dr. Balogun, walked over to Amara. "He is stable," Dr. Balogun said quietly. He pushed himself too hard. Stress, combined with a condition, caused a collapse. His condition? Amara asked, standing up. He was coughing blood. "That's not just stress." The doctor hesitated. He glanced at the sleeping figure on the bed, then back to Amara. "Mr. CEO is a very private man. It is his place to tell you, not mine. But I will say this. He needs rest, extreme rest. If he continues to operate at this level of intensity, the next collapse will be his last. The doctor left, leaving Amara alone with a stranger who had saved her. She walked to the window. Down below, social media was likely burning. She had no home. Her accounts were probably frozen by now. David was petty like that. She was a laughingstock, and her savior was lying in a coma-like sleep. "You're staring," a rasping voice said. Amara spun around. Junho was awake. He was trying to sit up, wincing as a movement pulled at the foreline. "Don't move," she said, rushing to the bedside. "The doctor said you need rest." "Doctors say many things." Junho muttered. He pulled the foreneedle out of his arm with a sharp tug. A bead of blood welled up, but he ignored it. "I have a meeting in Tokyo in an hour via video link." "You just collapsed in an elevator." Amara snapped. "You were coughing blood. You're not taking a meeting." Junho paused, looking at her. It was the first time he had really looked at her without the chaos of the ballroom. She was beautiful, even with her mascara smudged and her eyes red from crying. But there was fire in her now. He liked fire. "Amara," he said, testing the name, "do you know why I helped you? Because David owed you money?" "No. David is an insect. I could have crushed him from my office without ever stepping foot in that ballroom." Junho swung his legs over the edge of the bed. He grabbed a glass of water from a nightstand. "I helped you because I need something." Amara took a step back, crossing her arms over the robe. I'm not paying you back with my body, if that's what you think. I just left a marriage where I was treated like property." Junho actually chuckled. It was a dry, rusty sound. "I don't want your body. Amara, I want your name." He stood up, swaying slightly, but regained his balance. He walked to a desk and picked up a tablet. "My family," he began, tapping the screen, "is the CO Syndicate. They run half of Incheon. My uncle is currently trying to declare me mentally incompetent, so he can seize control of Sapphire Holdings. He claims I have no stability, no ties, no legacy." He turned the tablet to face her. It showed a legal document, a marriage certificate. "I need a wife," Junho said flatly. "A wife who is desperate. A wife who hates the world right now and wants to burn it down. A wife who needs protection as much as I need legitimacy." Amara stared at him. "You want to marry me? You don't even know me." "I know you were publicly humiliated," Junho said, his voice dropping to that steel-cutting tone again. "I know your husband just replaced you with your best friend. I know you have 0 naira to your name right now because David just froze your joint accounts. My assistant checked 5 minutes ago." Amara felt the sting of tears, but she blinked them back. "If you marry me," Junho continued, "it is a business arrangement. 6 months. In exchange, I give you unlimited access to my resources. I protect you. And more importantly," he walked closer to her, his dark eyes locking onto hers, "I will help you destroy David Okoye. Not just hurt him, erase him." The offer hung in the air. It was madness. It was dangerous. This man was clearly involved in organized crime. He was sick. He was terrifying. But then Amara thought of Zainab's smile. She thought of the red cake on her dress. She thought of the years she wasted trying to be a perfect wife for a man who saw her as an incubator. 6 months, she asked. 6 months. Then we divorce, you get a settlement of $10 million. And you disappear to wherever you want. Why only 6 months? Junho's face tightened. A shadow passed over his eyes. The secret of leukemia. He refused to speak aloud. "Because," he said softly, "that is all the time I have to give." The intercom by the door beeped. "Sir," the security chief's voice crackled. "Mr. Okoye is in the lobby. He has police with him. He claims you kidnapped his wife." Junho looked at Amara. He didn't move. He waited. "Well," he asked, "are you his wife, or are you mine?" Amara looked at the door, then back at the man who looked like death but offered her life. She walked over to the desk, picked up the stylus, and signed the digital document on the tablet. "Send him up," Amara said to the intercom, her voice trembling but loud. When the elevator doors opened 2 minutes later, David stormed in, followed by 2 corrupt policemen he had likely bribed. "There she is," David shouted. "Amara, get over here. You're coming home. You're making a scene." Junho was sitting in the armchair now, sipping whiskey, looking bored. Amara stood beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. "I'm not going anywhere, David," Amara said coldly. "You are my wife." David lunged forward. Junho moved his hand. It was a subtle gesture, a flick of the wrist. From the shadows of the hallway, 3 men in dark suits emerged. They were Korean, massive, and held suppressed submachine guns at their sides. The policemen immediately holstered their pistols and backed away. Hands up, they knew the hierarchy of predators. "She is not your wife," Junho said, taking a sip of his drink. "According to Nigerian and international law, as of 3 minutes ago, she is Mrs. Seo." He stood up and walked over to David. He towered over him. "And if you ever raise your voice at my wife again," Junho whispered, leaning into David's ear, "I will have your tongue cut out and fed to the stray dogs in Yaba." David paled, looking from the guns to Amara's cold face. "You're making a mistake, Amara," David hissed, backing into the elevator. "He's a monster." "Maybe," Amara said, looking at Junho, "but he's my monster." The doors closed. Junho exhaled, his posture sagging the moment the threat was gone. He stumbled. Amara caught him this time. "The deal is sealed," he whispered, his skin burning with fever. "Now, I need to sleep." 3 months passed. The scandal of the Sapphire wedding had dominated the tabloids for weeks, only to be replaced by the even more shocking news of Amara's transformation. She was no longer the timid housewife in sensible heels. She was the face of Sapphire Holdings' charity arm. She wore couture from Paris and Seoul. She was seen at art galleries, auctions, and board meetings, always at Junho's side. But inside the penthouse, the reality was different. It was a quiet, intimate war against time. Junho spoiled her, yes, but not with jewelry or cars, though those were plentiful. He spoiled her with experiences. He found the list she had written in her diary, a bucket list David had always mocked, and he made it his mission: learn to paint. He hired a master from the Lagos Art Academy to come to the penthouse on Tuesdays, see the sunrise over the ocean. He woke her up at 4 a.m., drove her to a private beach in Badagry, and they sat in silence, drinking coffee as the world turned gold. Ride a motorcycle. That was today. Amara stood on the balcony, watching Junho check the engine of a sleek black Ducati. He looked healthier today. The blood transfusions he received secretly every Thursday gave him bursts of energy for the weekend. She walked out, helmet in hand. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. David always said it was too dangerous. Junho looked up, grease on his cheek. He smiled, a rare, genuine smile that made his eyes crinkle. David was afraid of living. "Are you?" "No," she answered. She climbed on behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. He felt solid, warm. They tore through the streets of Lagos, weaving through the chaotic traffic, flying over the third mainland bridge with the lagoon sparkling beneath them. For an hour, there was no mafia, no divorce, no sickness, just wind and speed. They stopped at a roadside buka on the outskirts of the city to eat spicy jollof rice. It was humble, dirty, and loud, a stark contrast to the penthouse. "I haven't eaten here since university," Amara laughed, wiping pepper sauce from her lip. Junho watched her, his food untouched. He wasn't hungry. He hadn't been hungry for weeks. "You look happy," he said. "I am," she admitted. She reached across the plastic table and took his hand. "Junho, we need to talk about the contract." He stiffened. "What about it?" "I don't want the $10 million, she said softly. "And I don't want to leave in 3 months. Junho pulled his hand away. "Amara, don't." "Why not? We're good together. You feel it too. I know you do." "It's not about feeling," he snapped, harsher than he intended. He stood up, turning away to hide the sudden nosebleed that had started. He grabbed a napkin, pressing it to his face. "We stick to the deal." Why are you pushing me away? She demanded, standing up too. Every time we get close, you shut down. Where are you hiding? Let's go, he said, his voice muffled by the napkin. Now. The ride back was silent. When they got to the penthouse, Junho went straight to his study and locked the door. Amara stood in the hallway, frustrated and hurt. She went to the master bedroom to change. As she threw her jacket onto the bed, she knocked over Junho's leather satchel. Paper spilled out. She sighed, kneeling to pick them up. Business contracts, bank transfers, and a thick manila envelope stamped with the logo of a specialist oncology clinic in Seoul. Amara froze. She knew she shouldn't open it. But the memory of the blood on the handkerchief, the fainting, the secret Thursday appointments, it all clicked. She opened the envelope. Patient, C.O. Junho. Diagnosis, acute myeloid leukemia. Advance. Prognosis, terminal. Estimated 2 to 4 months without aggressive chemotherapy. Patient refused treatment. The paper shook in her hands. He wasn't pushing her away because he didn't love her. He was pushing her away because he was dying. The study door opened. Junho walked out, looking pale and exhausted. He stopped when he saw her on the floor, the papers scattered around her. His expression crumbled. The stoic mask fell away, leaving just a tired, scared man. Amara, he whispered. You refuse treatment, she said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and grief. Why? Because the treatment would have kept me in a hospital bed for a year with no guarantee of survival, he said, walking slowly toward her. I chose 6 months of life instead of 12 months of dying. He knelt in front of her. I wanted to fix your life before I left, he said. That was the deal. You idiot, she cried, hitting his chest weakly. You fixed my life just to break my heart? I didn't plan on falling in love with you, he admitted, his voice breaking. That wasn't in the contract. Amara grabbed his face, pulling him into a desperate kiss. It tasted of salt and tears. We're not giving up, she said against his lips. I don't care what the doctors say. You are not leaving me. Not yet. There is no yet. Amara, the sand is almost gone. Then we make the sand count, she vowed. But the universe had other plans. Junho's phone rang. It was his head of security. Sir, the voice was urgent. We have a problem. Your uncle has landed in Lagos, and he's meeting with David Okoye. Junho closed his eyes. The shark smelled blood. The annual Sapphire Gala was the event of the year. The ballroom had been repaired since the cake incident, and tonight it was filled with even more opulence. But the tension was different. Junho stood in the dressing room, struggling to button his cufflinks. His fingers were numb. The neuropathy was setting in. Amara stepped in behind him. She wore a dress of midnight blue, armored in diamonds. She looked like a queen. Let me, she said softly, fastening the cuffs. You shouldn't be here tonight. Junho said, My uncle, he will try something. He knows I'm weak. I'm your wife, Amara said firmly. I stand where you stand. They walked into the ballroom hand in hand. The murmurs started immediately. Junho looked thinner, sharper, his skin pale against his tuxedo, but his eyes were blazing. Across the room, David Okoye stood next to an older Korean man, Uncle Sang-woo. David looked smug. He had lost his dealerships, yes, but Sang-woo had promised him reinstatement in exchange for testimony that Junho was mentally unstable. The music stopped. Sang-woo took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, the older man announced, I am afraid I must interrupt this celebration. It has come to board's attention that my nephew, CEO Junho, is critically ill and no longer fit to lead. Gasps. He has been hiding a terminal diagnosis while making reckless financial decisions. Sang-woo continued, gesturing to David. Mr. Okoye here can testify to the erratic behavior caused by a condition. David stepped forward, grabbing the mic. He's crazy. He threatened to kill me. He kidnapped my ex-wife. Amara felt Junho sway beside her. He was fading. The lights, the stress. It was too much. Junho, she whispered. We have to leave. No, Junho said. He straightened his spine. It took every ounce of will he had left. He walked toward the stage. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He walked with the slow, inevitable rhythm of a funeral march. He climbed the stairs. He took the microphone from David's hand. David flinched, expecting a blow. "It is true," Jun-ho said into the mic. His voice was weak, but the room was silent enough to hear a pin drop. "I am dying." The confirmation sent a shockwave through the crowd. "My uncle wants Sapphire Holdings," Jun-ho said, looking at Sang-woo. "He wants the power, the money." He turned to look at Amara, who was standing in the center of the room, tears streaming down her face. "But Sapphire Holdings is not just money. It is a promise, and I keep my promises." Jun-ho pulled a document from his inside jacket pocket. "This morning, I transferred 51% of my voting shares, the controlling interest of the entire CO empire, to a trust." Sang-woo's eyes widened. You can't." "The sole beneficiary and executor of that trust," Jun-ho said, pointing to Amara, "is my wife, Amara CO. Chaos. She owns a hotel. She owns a company. She owns everything." Jun-ho turned to David. "And her first act as owner," Jun-ho smiled, blood staining his teeth, "is to ban you from this property for life. Security." The guards didn't hesitate. They worked for the paycheck, and the paycheck now came from Amara. They grabbed David and Sang-woo, dragging them kicking and screaming toward the exit. Jun-ho watched them go. He had won. He looked at Amara. She was running toward him. The world tilted. The floor rushed up. This time he didn't fight it. Epilogue. The Sapphire Queen. 6 months later. The cemetery on the hill overlooked the Lagos Lagoon. It was quiet, peaceful. Amara stood before the black granite stone. She traced the Hangul characters carved into it, then the English name below. Seo Jun-ho, 1987-2023. He lived briefly, but he loved completely. She placed a single white orchid on the stone. She wasn't wearing black. She wore a sharp white business suit. Her phone buzzed. It was her assistant, Mrs. Seo. "The board meeting starts in 20 minutes. The investors from Seoul are waiting. Tell them I'm coming." Amara said. She touched her stomach, a small, barely there bump, a part of him that the contract hadn't accounted for, a miracle that the doctor said was impossible for her, and impossible for a man undergoing chemotherapy in his final weeks. But Jun-ho had specialized in the impossible. "Thank you," she whispered to Stone, "for the pain, for the love, for the life." She put on her sunglasses, turned her back on the grave, and walked toward the waiting convoy of black SUVs. She had an empire to rule.